wonderful beast. I'm quite partial to the livery, if I can say so myself. This is a 1963 Corvette Grand Sport, the Roadster version. You can tell because the roof has been sawed off. More on that in a bit. This brute has been brought to Assetto Corsa along with a bunch of friends as a part of a small must-have update for historic sim racers everywhere. As a follow-up to the initial release just about 1 year ago now, Baza & Co. have released version 1.2 for a couple of their most celebrated mod packs, the Grand Touring Classics and World Sportscar Legends. Along with a suite of refinements and tweaks to each and every existing car in both packs comes a set of 12 new vintage beauties to fill out those historic fields. If you're counting, that's over 45 tuned and balanced machines for you to enjoy historic sim racing goodness. I've covered both packs before and raced them many times, but even prior to this set of updates, there was just about everything a vintage racer could dream of. But somehow they've found 12 new machines which feel like they should have been here all along, and help to round out and complete these stunning sets. These are some of the best packs to race online, and having even more choice will only enhance the fun. It's a real celebration of vintage motorsport. There is a lot to cover in 1.2, both in the originals with their various updates to suspension geometries, graphical shader fixes, tweaked AI values, cleaned up paint schemes, refracting headlights, working wipers, higher res cockpits, and one of my favorites, working odometers across all cars, so you can track just how much you've driven them. The update further refines what was already great and ensures these sets are both cohesive and quality from front to back. But as good as those existing cars are, the draw will obviously be those dozen new machines. I spent the last couple of nights trying them out, and overall they're all fantastic additions. But let's zoom on a little bit closer and look at a few of my favorites and do a couple laps here at a wonderful 60s version of Laguna Seca. And that brings us back to the Corvette. The big one here is a part of the World Sportscar pack, but there's also a more tame version, a little more like the street car counterpart, in the GTC pack as well. But the Grand Sport with its 388 cubic inch small block is quite the unruly mistress. The hardtop version was already a part of the World Sportscar Legends set, released last year. But with this update comes the dubbed Roadster version with its roof removed, so you can really let your hair out and hear this 4-speed demon sing. I couldn't say no to a car like this. The GP Labs driving school is very appropriate. I have to thank Pasta for that one. So I'll try to keep it on the road here at Old Laguna. Laguna Seca was like this up and through the 80s. I think they changed it for MotoGP specifically in the late 80s, adding a whole intersection, but it's really just an outer loop. Fantastic course built by Rainmaker, and a very challenging one for a car like this as we'll come onto the Rahal Straight, or I guess what would be known as the Rahal Straight. This car, it wants to slide everywhere. It's very tricky as we'll come to the corkscrew for the first time. Slide it on out and down the hill now. I had so much fun as we'll drift it around. It's tough not to drift. It's not quick to do this, but in this car you kind of have to, or else it just plow understeers. This corner is a great example of that. You can't quite get it hucked in the same way, and we're just going to understeer until we can get on the throttle to get it to turn. We'll come to the final corner, pit wall, sat pretty much right where we'd want to be. Add a little throttle, get it to turn around right out to the hay bales. Whoa, I think I kissed him. It's all right. Keep going. This car was built in extremely small numbers, and I'm not sure where the roofless version came from, if it was actually a thing the Grand Sport had. There certainly were some Corvettes that didn't have roofs, but I love how it's simply a sawed-off roof. You can see the A-pillar, what's left of it, here on my left, ready to cause me some harm if we were to hit something. This was the second generation Corvette and was seeking a loophole in the rules that would allow a car in the GT class to basically have a much bigger engine than was allowed in some of the other classes, and exploited that to great effect. so much fun driving the other kind of cars like this in these sets. The Maserati 151, the Cobras, of course, the Shelby Daytona, which I raced at Riverside this past year with Stroll. I love something about a car that just has a little bit too much power, not a lot of grip, just won't really understeer there. It requires a certain finesse, and it's something that these sets, it just brings a smile to my face to just slide around the whole time, wearing out your tires, and just having a lot of fun. Get in there. You gotta watch the curbing here as it just kind of missed that. Ooh, kiss both edges. Yeah, certainly the driving school, the GP Labs driving school, if you can drive this one, you're doing all right. I think I have a little bit of work to do here before I can start instructing people. Absolutely insane car, and especially if you think of 1963, this thing was leaps and bounds more powerful, and just such a outrageous car compared to a lot of the others that it would have raced against. You can see why the Corvette has formed such a legacy, and this is one of the most rare examples that they've had. I'll just kiss the dirt there. So much fun. This one, I've done a lot of laps in this, just doing some of the video for the intro as well as practicing for this. You'll see all my various skid marks everywhere, and I can highly recommend this one. It's a really radical driving experience and something that will give you a lot of joy as it's done for myself. Well, now to the other end of the spectrum for something much more refined but no less fun. This is the 1961 Ferrari 250 GT. The SWB model specifically, it's a part of the GTC set and is really quite the striking looking Ferrari. It's significant for being the last true road and race Ferrari. It's a dual purpose design. It was built to do it all. It could drive the 24 hours of Le Mans and then on Monday, drive you to the grocery store, if you're really blessed. But it does have that vintage look to it, a lot less sleek looking than the GTs that would come just in the next couple of years. But it was absolutely not a slow car, and with its ultra short wheelbase, the style and function give it that little something special, and it's a blast to drive. Well, I said we'd drive something from the complete opposite end of the spectrum, and this is certainly it. This Ferrari is a completely different experience than the Corvette, but in such a good way. So we'll come through the first corner here. This is a gentleman's car. This one drives so planted, it feels almost a bit heavy, but not in a way where it's slow. It just is very controllable through the corners. So we'll just dip off the throttle here. I think you can probably take this flat out on a good lap. You can get the rear end out if you give it a little bit more than it needs in the corner, but otherwise it's almost a docile racing experience compared to the others. Get it into the corkscrew. If I was to drive a car for 24 hours, I think something like this would certainly take it over some of the more outrageous cars of the period. So we'll get down a couple of gears, try not to over-rev the beautiful V12. I suppose that's the one thing that could let you down, but it was a very consistent car, and I suppose I don't talk about it enough, but the sounds in these sets are really nice, both the interior here and the exterior. There's a great YouTube channel out there, Tedward, who does just drive-alongs with a bunch of cool cars. I don't know how this guy gets the cars that he does just to test drive, but he recently did a 250, not the souped-up version that I'm driving here. But this is all coming off as very authentic. I guess that's my closest experience to a car like this. It's something that's a bit foreign to me. But if you're familiar with the 250 that comes with Assetto Corsa, this is basically the car that preceded it, and was very, very successful. Even into the new car being released, I think in 1962, there were still quite a few of these at Le Mans, and they did quite well. We'll get it up to gear. It's very pleasurable to drive, so well behaved, and a nice car to look at too. Things I find kind of ironic, I guess, with this is the team that won at Le Mans in 60, the first time this car won, was an all-French team, and then I believe in 61 one of the drivers was French as well, and there was this long reign throughout the 60s of Italians and British and Americans and everybody winning at Le Mans, and the French didn't have their day, but they were very good in this car, and it wasn't an Italian team, at least in 60, that won it. But it would be quite a few years until the French would come back, as we'll take a look at in a second. Negotiate the corkscrew here. Fantastic course, Laguna Seca. Even in this more abbreviated version, I quite like the modern version of Laguna Seca. I think what they added for the motorbikes in the late 80s was a good addition, especially for modern race cars. This course would be far too quick through the first sector, but it is quite special without any sort of barriers or anything around, and quite undisturbed. This as we'll slide it through here up to the final corner. She's coming alive a little bit now. It is so well behaved though, you kind of forget how quick you're going. This car could do reported 160 miles per hour at Le Mans. It's 300 horsepower. It's a souped up car. They call it a hot rod. I don't know how to pronounce the Italian word for it, but they call it a hot rod version of the car. It's got a bunch of modifications to it. It's essentially the road car, but lightened and higher horsepower and things like they would do to stock cars. And I always, in my mind, think of GT racing as the stock car equivalent of the sports car world. I don't know if that's correct or not, but this car truly embodies that, where it is a nice road car, but souped up for racing, and I quite like that. It's a fantastic car and a great addition to the GTC set. I think just helps round out that field of already stellar machines. And now to a car which was fully French through and through. The wonderful and beautiful, I think so at least, Matra MS630. By the 1960s, the Italians, Brits, Germans, and Americans had fully taken over Le Mans. And obviously the French were eager to regain their rightful place on that top step. So in came Matra with the revolutionary idea to use technology across sports car and Formula racing. And lucky for them, engine regulations were set to be aligned across the series for the 1968 season. But what we have here is the version that debuted in 1967 using a 1.9-liter BRM. The MS630's chassis was designed using ultra-modern wind tunnel technology. It's a norm these days, but this car was truly groundbreaking. And although very quick, its advances weren't without struggles. Like to do the burnout away from the line, but it's just so hard to do. I think the car's gears are quite long. This was a Le Mans special. It's so focused. It competed in the whole championship through 67, 68, 69. Of course, the next iteration of this car coming in 69, but its sole purpose was to win Le Mans for France, and it very much did not do that. I love cars like this. It's oddly enough another Matra, the Matra Formula car that RSS did. I talk about this exact same thing, but it's not just Matra, but it is cars that are kind of average, or maybe not the ones that won all the races. you want to race the Ferraris and the Fords and the Porsches, but the Matra and cars like this, the average cars, the cars that maybe didn't win, are some of the most interesting, I think. And something I immediately noticed when driving this is that it feels very modern. It has a few tendencies of older cars. It has a little bit of a lift on it. If you come over the top of a hill, you can really notice it here down towards the first corner at the end of the straight. But overall through the corner, it drives a lot more like a modern car than cars of the 60s, maybe more like a 70s car than a 60s one. We'll come over the hump. You get a little bit of understeer there from a lack of downforce, but through a corner like this, it actually drives somewhere between a 70s car and a maybe an 80s car. And it's all that wind tunnel development. This was a really sophisticated car, and the results don't show just how remarkable it really was. Down a couple of gears. The soundtrack to this car is nice. I was worried when I saw that this had the BRM V8 engine in it and not the V10. Matra was really known for the sound of that V10, and it's something that I would love to hear recreated beautifully in a sim, but this engine sounds great as well. It sounds interesting from in the car. It sounds really nice from outside the car. Unfortunately, this wasn't the successful car. It retired, I think, in every Le Mans that it was in, at least 67, 68. Retired quite early as well in 67. Matra scaled down their efforts every year. I think they started with 3 cars in 67 and went to 2 and ultimately went to just one of these. But it was the later cars, the later Matras, that really made an impact. And by 1972, Matra was winning Le Mans. They won in 72, 73, and 74. And so this was a necessary step for them to get there. Maybe it wasn't the glory that they wanted it to be, but it is a remarkable car, and it's a very fun one to have. I'll say that this car might be the quickest of this category. It's contemporary, or would race against the Nissan, the Porsche 906, I believe, in that category, the P2000 set of cars. And in a straight line on a fast track, this car definitely has the legs. And because we've got that great simulator reliability, as long as you don't abuse the car yourself, I think this would be the car to have at something like a Le Mans. Around a track like this, maybe not. It's a little bit of a boat here or there. Maybe we could tune it out with setup. But it is fun to drive, and more importantly, an interesting piece of history to have. And also nice to see something other than Ford and Ferrari and Porsche on the grid with this set of cars. Quite a few laps around this course. I definitely want to try racing this car at some point, because I just think it's a really fantastic and interesting car. It's not the quickest, it's not the slowest, and it's got a great story behind it. What else more do you want? But this is a nicely behaved car, and it is not too difficult to drive just because it is a bit more docile. But if you want, you can get it to be a little more lively here, as we'll try to get it down the hill. See if I can slide it into this left-hander. There we go. Wow, it doesn't like it. Not as much. There we go, a little bit of a drift. Wow, I love it. I love when mods include stuff like this. A really interesting car, and one that's also pretty fun to drive. The last sports car to use the Dino mark, the 206S was built in limited numbers for the 1966 sports car season. Its ultra lightweight and nimble design was destined for greatness on the twisty and long circuits of the World Sports Car Championship. And its record speaks for itself, winning class at the 1966 Targa Florio, 1,000 km Spa, and Nürburgring, Nassau and Brands Hatch, and it even won outright at Ennepergusa. It was a fantastically quick car, and it's fantastic to look at. This car was built for circuits like the Targa Florio, and it's one I've been eagerly anticipating for that very reason. Italian motoring royalty on those roads, it's a perfect pair. The first thing that hit me with this car is just how amazingly detailed the cockpit is. It's such a nice model, and I think that goes for all the cars in these groups. The models all come from different places, conversions, some of them scratch created, others, but the detail and making sure that they appear well and cohesive in this sim does not go unnoticed, and I think this cockpit is one of the finest examples. It's such a beautiful car to look at. The cockpit is where you spend most of your time when you drive a car, so we'll get on the dirt just a little bit there. So it's nice to have a good cockpit for a car. The other thing that gets you with this car is just how absolutely tiny it is from the inside, but also gives you a good perspective on what it might be like on the outside. Driving the Matra, this is definitely a much different experience. All four of the cars that I'm looking at here all drive a lot different, and this is such a nimble and agile car, probably the most out of all four. That's why it was such a monster at the curvy tracks. Did really well in 66 across the board, but the Targa Florio, the Nürburgring, and then later the hill climbs and things is where this car really excelled, and it's because it's such a tiny and nimble machine. Get it into the first turn here. There we go. You really feel like you can put this car exactly where you want. It's very narrow, so you have plenty of room on some of the more tight tracks. This is a very wide circuit for a car like this, but it eats it up all the same. They say the engine in this was developed using the F1 engine, which is interesting because 1965-66, when this car would have been developed, was a transition time for Formula One, and so this is a 2-liter V6. In Formula One in 65, they ran a 1.5 liter was the limit, and then they went to the 3-liter for 66. So I think they must have taken a 1.5 liter and bored it out. And either way, how they did it, it creates quite a bit of power, and I love the note that it has in the sim here. It has a very low note that you maybe can hear. Sounds like it's maybe an octave down from the main engine RPM note that you're hearing. It's a very cool sound, very unique to this car. Driving this car almost anywhere, and it's a very well behaved car, especially for this era, and it looks nice too, so there's no complaints here. The Dino is an interesting brand or submark of Ferrari, and this being the last car, I think leaves a great heritage. Sicily is calling my name with this, and with some of the even more new updates for the Targa Florio with some additional laser scanning areas and 3D modeling and things, I really cannot wait to explore all that, and I think this may be the car that I do it in. Fantastic rendition of it, looks beautiful, drives beautiful. What else can you ask for? This is just scratching the surface of the great group of cars that's included in these two sets. Certainly hours of fun could be had just exploring each of the cars, learning a bit about their details, taking them out on the track and feeling their differences. It's a fantastic way to spend your time sim racing, and really gives me some of the most enjoyment I get out of Assetto Corsa. I cannot recommend these two updates enough, and it's something I know you'll see more of here in the near future. But that's it for now. I think I'll get that Dino out on the Targa Florio and really stretch its legs. Thank you for watching. This is GP Laps, and I'll see you all again next time.